And this is also one of the things, I can't remember which book talked about this, but like letting your partners like make their own mistakes at times and, letting them like take responsibility for their own feelings and not trying to make people feel secure, because you can't make other people like feel anything. And trying to make people feel secure can actually like backfire at times. So just practicing, letting things be as they may be.
Welcome to Normalizing Non-Monogamy, the podcast where we interview incredible people from across the entire spectrum of non-monogamy to hear their fascinating stories. We strive to bring guests on the show who have a healthy approach to non-monogamy. However, it's important to remember that everyone does it a little bit differently, and the views and opinions expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect our own.
Additionally, we produce this show for entertainment purposes only. Please be aware that we aren't doctors or therapists. Consult a medical professional for anything regarding your health that you might learn about on the show. Enjoy!
Welcome to episode 192. We're Finn and Emma, and today we have a super fun interview with Jacob. He's actually just about to be 22 in August, so happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Happy early birthday.
Well, we don't know when in August his birthday is, so.
Well, I guess we're taking a pretty good chance that it wasn't yesterday or the day before.
That's true.
The day before
or the day before that.
Also, super important today, happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
Now, this is our real anniversary.
Our real anniversary.
When we got married 9 years ago today.
Yes.
And so we're taking today off. We recorded this yesterday.
We did.
And we are planning to play mini golf all day long and eat ice cream and drink hard cider.
Yep, that's going to be our anniversary. And we're really, really, really excited.
So if you send us an email, we'll probably respond
on Thursday.
Or we might be drunk and high on ice cream and winning.
And mini golf.
We'll and maybe some go-karts.
Oh, this is new.
Well, surprise.
We'll have fun.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're going to have a low-key but fun. Actually, that's not that low-key.
Doesn't sound low-key. That sounds pretty wild for us.
Yeah, it's going to be wild for us.
So
we're going to have a fun anniversary celebration, and we just hijacked the entire intro here to talk about our anniversary.
That's all right. But back to Jacob. Thank you, Jacob, for coming on and sharing your story. It's a great look at somebody who's, as Emma said, just turning 22, so younger than a lot of our guests, which is amazing, and we're excited to start getting a different look at it. And also, Jacob is transmasculine, non-binary, and has had a handful of different relationship styles, and it's just a really exciting conversation. It's really fun. So again, thank you, Jacob, for coming on, sharing your story, and being here.
Yes.
Also, anybody who heard me say he was non-binary and then use he, him pronouns.
We confirm this.
This is what he prefers. So thank you for your concern. It was a concern of ours as well. All right.
Now, a few quick announcements, although we're going to keep them really short today. So our next virtual meet and greet is not announced yet, but we will have that date very soon. So stay tuned.
After our anniversary.
After our anniversary.
But before the next anniversary.
Yes. Those will be coming back very soon. So stay tuned. We promise to have that information out to you as soon as we can. Also, for Patreon, a huge thank you to everyone as part of our Patreon community. We've had a few new people, or actually quite a few new people sign up lately, and we couldn't be more thankful for all of you. If you're looking for a place to have community and find like-minded people to chat with, just have fun with, please check it out. We have a MeWe chat. We have monthly Q&As. We have a men's and women's group. So we would love to have you. If you're interested at all, please go check out our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com, and click on the Patreon button.
Really, one quick note on that as well. We don't have any of the dates for the August meet and greet, or the August, well, we don't have the August meet and greet either. The August Q&A or men's and women's calls posted yet. They'll be coming out in the next couple of days, and we will announce all of that next week.
Yes.
One other last final thing we wanted to mention before we get into the episode is just a really quick shout out to one of our favorite places in the world, stdcheck.com.
Yes, one of our favorite places in the world.
Besides mini golf and ice cream.
And hard cider.
It's but maybe we'll do that tomorrow too. You know why? Because we don't even have to make an appointment.
Right.
We just sign up online. We show up at LabCorp or Quest. It takes about 10 minutes. We give them all of the bodily fluids they want. And the next day we get a text message with our results.
Yep.
And it costs just like 10 ice creams. Not even.
It's like maybe,
not with a no, not anymore. Ice cream's expensive.
Ice cream's expensive.
So it's like $130 for a 10-panel test. And if you use the links on our website, it supports the show so we can buy more ice cream and you save $10.
Yes.
So thank you in advance for doing that. We greatly appreciate it. And we highly encourage you to get tested, know your status, and talk about it with all of your potential and existing partners.
Yes. Couldn't said it better.
I know. And
go to our website.
Yes.
normalizingmonogamy.com. There's podcast show notes there. There's, like Finn said, links to the STD check. There are links to Patreon, and contact us. We have links there to send us an email or send us a voicemail. We'd love to hear from you. And while we will not reply today when this episode airs, we will reply in the very near future.
We reply to every email.
We do.
And to find those STD check links really quick, that's under the resources tab or in the podcast show notes of your podcast player. There is a direct link. And I think that's everything we needed to say today. Until the outro. Happy anniversary, Emma.
Happy anniversary.
Let's
Finn.
have a good conversation with Jacob.
Okay, let's go. Welcome, Jacob, to the show. We're excited to have you here this morning. And, well, actually, technically, I think it's afternoon for you since you're...
It's our morning.
It's our morning.
We can be self-absorbed.
Yeah. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah. Should I introduce myself?
Yeah, go for it. We'd love to hear a little more about you. We got a little bit in the email, but tell us who Jacob is.
Yeah, so I'm Jacob. I am 21. I'll be 22 in August. Graduated from college about a couple weeks ago. And I've been with my partner, Sam, for about 3.5 years now. And I identify as polyamorous, but I tend to use the label non-monogamous when talking with other people, just because I found that there are some connotations with polyamorous that aren't necessarily negative, but don't really describe our relationship setup right now. For example, I tend that when I use that term, people think that we're dating multiple people, but like always together. And that's not really the case right now.
Yeah. Well, what does the dynamic look like?
Yeah. So, Sam and I have been together for about 3.5 years. We met when we were 18. We met on Tinder. He super liked me. And I liked him back. And it actually turned out that we lived really close to each other. We actually went to high school in the same school district and had a couple of mutual friends, but never met that way. But afterwards, we figured out that we had almost met a couple times. So we met when I was in my first semester in college, and I went to college about 40 minutes away from my hometown. So I ended up driving back and forth, and he drove back and forth. So it was I called it medium distance at first because it wasn't long distance by any terms, but we were really seeing each other once or twice a week. So for a while that felt a little bit further away. And then so we met in 2017, and then 2019, I forget if it was February 2018 or 2019, but he got his first apartment, and it was like a 1-bedroom, 800 square foot. It was a good like starter apartment where he lived there full time, and I would come and visit him on the weekends there. I had my cat Pebble with me, so I couldn't come that often. So that kept Sam mostly coming to visit me because I had the cat with me at school and didn't want to, be moving her back and forth too much. And then think about September 2019, when we had been together for about 2 years, I decided to talk to him about, maybe exploring polyamory or non-monogamy. And at that point for me, it was because I wanted to explore a bit more sexually, because he was really my first, real boyfriend, and he was the first person I'd really been sexual with. And I kind of framed it as hey, I love you so much. At that point, even though we were had only been together a couple of years, we definitely saw each other being really long-term partners, and we're really on the same page about that. And I was kind of thinking this is great, but if this is the only person I ever get to have sex with, that would be just a little bit not sad, but I don't know, I feel like I'd be missing out on some of life's experiences, I guess. And he was pretty down with that because he had more partners than I had, and he had actually dated people in high school and stuff. Because I grew up in a pretty liberal area, but being one of the very few out queer people in school, and being trans and not really out to myself yet. It was just kind of awkward, and I didn't really have those like typical like high school relationships, I guess.
Yeah, no, and I think it'd be wonderful if you were willing to talk a little more about that journey, right? Like coming through high school and transitioning, and like what did that timeline look like, and how did that impact like your relationships and dating and all of that?
Yeah, so I think I realized that I was not cis when I was like 14, but I didn't admit to myself that that meant I was trans until I was like 15 or so. And then I decided so I identify as transmasculine, so assigned female at birth, transition to male. I don't really identify as a man, so I guess like non-binary, but like the gender slider's like closer to male.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, so then I was 15, I was like, crap, I guess I'm a dude, but I'm like not gonna do anything about it because that would just be like, it would be really hard to come out and everything. And by the time I was 17, I was like, I gotta do something about this. This is getting really, really hard. So I came out to my parents, and they were really cool about it. They were a little bit hesitant at first, but they let me start T. By the time I was like 1 month out from turning 18, and I got top surgery a couple months after I turned 18. So I met Sam when I was about 3 months on T. So at that point, I had come out socially to most people in my life, and I still didn't really pass as male. So I think that I still gave off very like trans guy vibes, I guess, early on. So yeah, I met Sam when I was pretty early in my transition, but I felt like I'd gone through a lot of the like, the early phases of just like the social transitions, also a pretty big deal. Yeah, so I was kind of glad that I met him at that point, so that he didn't have to like, unlearn my old name or like, really like get used to like a new set of pronouns. So he really met me after I started, going by Jacob and identifying as male. So I think that was easier in that regard. And he was really super supportive the whole way through, which was awesome. And I think that it did make dating a little bit harder, I guess. And I think that's one of the reasons why I kind of liked Tinder, is because, I could put it in my bio and people could either, kind of self-select in or out of that. And I think that, and you do get the occasional like chaser, but you can also kind of sort that out also. So I feel like I had a smaller dating pool, but the people who were liking me were more cool in the first place, I guess. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing. I think one thing you said in there that I would maybe again love to hear more about is you said that the social transition was as big of a deal or maybe more than the like physical transition that you went through. And I'd maybe love to hear more about that. Yeah.
So I think it's like I said earlier, I grew up in a like pretty liberal area, and I knew people would be cool with it, but it's still like hard to say it. And I found that for myself, like getting misgendered by people who knew I was trans, even like accidentally, actually like hurt more than getting misgendered by people who I like didn't have a relationship with or who didn't know. Because like, if I don't tell anybody, then like they can't possibly know they're misgendering me because I haven't said otherwise. And so then but then I also, eventually came out because I was like, well, if I don't tell people my pronouns, they're never going to gender me correctly. So I came out kind of like, and I started pretty small and then got bigger and bigger. So I came out to like a few close friends and then like a couple of my teachers, and then like had a couple days where in some of my class, like one of my classes, I like literally like stood up. I was like, hey y'all, I'm trans. Please call me Jacob and use he, him pronouns for me. And they're all like, cool. And some other classes, so I didn't really interact with other people. I didn't really make a big deal of it, but actually ended up coming out publicly like probably like a month before I graduated high school. So like I probably could have made it all the way through, but I was really ready to be out, I think. And it was nice to like hear my correct name at graduation and stuff like that. And so I think that going to college from there definitely was it was a lot easier to kind of like establish like a new identity, because you're coming to a new school, people from all over, you don't know many people, they don't really know your past and stuff. Yeah, it was nice to just be able to kind of like go to college and like start over.
Yeah, you get to reinvent yourself almost in
exactly.
that new opportunity. For sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe just build on like, I know that that was a super difficult like couple of year period, and I think just to like acknowledge that like, and you had pretty much the support of your parents behind you, and I just like I think that's amazing, but it's also just important to remember that like even with that it was still difficult.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
So Yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing that. I know it's probably not an easy story to maybe relive at times, so
it's fine. Big shout out to the pediatric gender clinic at Duke University. They're like, I don't think they're definitely the only one in North Carolina. I'm not sure how many else there are in the country, honestly, but they help people under 18 transition, and they are all super awesome social worker there. I'm not sure if she's still there. Kristen, she's really great. So big thanks. I mean, my parents were supportive, but I also still had to find a healthcare provider who was willing to help somebody, who was younger transition. So big shout out to them because they're all super awesome over there.
That's amazing. Thank you for shouting that out, because the more resources we can put out there too, to help other people are, we want to do that as much as possible. So thank you for shouting that out. And I'm so glad that you were able to find that. Yes, you said it was, challenging, of course, but you were able to find the resources and the people to help.
Yeah, definitely very lucky.
And so when you got to college, you and Sam were together at this point.
Yeah, I hadn't met him yet. Actually, it's sometimes I think about we came so close to not meeting, and I wonder how different my life would be, because I matched with him on Tinder when I was in our hometown for 3 days for fall break. So sometimes I think about if I hadn't been on Tinder that Wednesday, I would be living with somebody else now probably. Right. Life would be very different. But I'm really glad we met.
Yeah, no, and I think I misspoke that you hadn't met him until you got to college, and and now you're reinventing yourself. You have a new partner, and you're going to start exploring polyamory. I think those are a lot of huge changes all at once.
Yeah, and totally.
How did it go when you and Sam decided to start? You said you brought it up. How did those conversations go, and how did it progress?
So I think that like most of the queer identities I've learned about in my life, actually probably first learned about polyamory through Tumblr when I was 15 or 16. And I kind of thought my perception of it at that time was that basically it's the same as monogamy, but it's 3 people instead of 2, which for some people it is, but most people are probably not in a closed dedicated triad, which is fine. But my kind of perception of that was that this is a thing people do, but they kind of just end up falling into it. It's not a thing that people go out and choose to be. And I think I might have got the message because, a lot of the messaging about sexuality that I received growing up, which I think is a lot better messaging than we got in the past, is that sexuality in general is not a choice. And I think that polyamory, that orientation is true. I think some people are more polyamorously oriented than monogamously oriented, but also I think polyamory is different from sexuality in the fact, or non-monogamy at least is different in sexuality. Is that you can kind of have a conversation and sit down and say hey, do you want to be monogamous or not, versus you can't sit down and say hey, do you want to be a gay couple or a straight, it's it's not that same level, I guess. I think I first talked with Sam about non-monogamy in fall of 2019. So we've been together for about 2 years at that point. So we'd been together for a while, and he was the only person I'd really been with, and I loved him, and I still love him super great. But I did notice I was starting to have some attraction for my friend Isaac, and at first it was something I was I'm just never going to act on this because I love Sam and we're together and we're going to be together, and I don't want to jeopardize that relationship. And then I know it's over the months those feelings didn't really go away, so I started kind of Googling help, I'm in a relationship and I'm attracted to somebody else. And then I ended up finding some stories about people who had successfully done polyamory or non-monogamy, and I was I wonder if this could be an option for us. And because I'd also known that Sam had more sexual partners than I had, and not a ton, but he had a couple girlfriends in high school, which I feel is more of the standard or whatever. And he identifies as pan, and we consider ourselves a pretty gay couple because it's fellas, is it gay for 2 guys to be in love? It's kind of our joking question whenever, because I think for some people just can't wrap their head around trans people being in a relationship. What is it? Is it gay or straight based on their assigned gender or assigned sex at birth? But yeah, we are gay. Sorry, I was saying, yeah. So I talked with Sam about it, and I was hey, I kind of want to bang our friend Isaac, because they had been friends since middle school, and they were part of like a group of friends we lovingly refer to as like the boys with a Z, who Sam has been friends with that most of them like all his life. Like they were in like, preschool playgroup together. They grew up in the same neighborhood. So they were all like really close, and I kind of also joined that friend group by proxy when we started dating, but then eventually like developed more individual relationships with them kind of separately of Sam after a few years, which I feel like is, pretty common. And so this was kind of a hard conversation to have at first, because I knew that, Sam and Isaac were really close friends, and I wasn't really sure how Sam was going to react to me saying like, hey, I find our friend really attractive. And I also wasn't really sure how Isaac was going to react to it either, but I definitely wanted to have that conversation with Sam first. So we talked about it, and he's like, yeah. And I think I brought it up with him, and he was like, let me go on a motorcycle ride and think about it, because that's kind of his like meditative thing. Is he loves motorcycle riding, and I've gotten into it with him too, but that's like his thing. So we went on a ride, and I was kind of just like waiting at home, like, gosh, like what's he gonna say? And he's like, yeah, I thought about it, and yeah, I think I super understand why you would want to have like more sexual experiences. And like I've actually also been having some feelings about your roommate Jamie that I haven't really been acting on. So it kind of felt like almost an exchange at first, where it's like, okay, like I'll have sex with our friend and you'll have sex with like my friend. I'm baby, I guess. So I actually and then I did end up hanging out with Isaac more, and we talked about it, and he was like, yeah, okay. And we actually did end up having sex once, and that was pretty cool, because I think it was the first time where I had been attracted to somebody I had like known for a while, and who was kind of like organically also attracted back to me. Because like I think Sam and I also had really good chemistry, but matching on Tinder is like, it's a different context than just like meeting somebody and kind of like developing feelings for them for like a longer time. So that was pretty cool. But then shortly after that, he started seeing somebody. And so Isaac started seeing somebody else. He was like, I'm going to be monogamous with them. I'm like, okay, cool. Like I got my experience out of it. And we're still really good friends to this day. And that friend group is still together, which is really cool. And yeah, so Sam was pursuing my roommate, Jamie, and that one was a little bit harder for me to parse, because I think he was also romantically interested in her, which is like all fine and good. And I think now we're actually in a more of like, I would call us like unofficial relationship anarchists, I guess. But at the time, I think that being less educated on polyamory, we were kind of going about it like, okay, like, we'll both make sure like both of us are okay with everything, and we'll, try to have sex and not develop feelings. But that's not really how it always works out, I think. So, and I think at that point it was hard because at that point I did start doing like more like actual research, and I read More Than Two and Tales from the Polycule, which I feel like are kind of like standard like beginner books. But I really liked the parts of More Than Two about how that everyone has their own agency, including the people who you are also doing other things with. Because I think that a lot of I think maybe not so now, but I think a couple of years ago, like a lot of non-monogamy primer stuff are really aimed at like couples opening up, and it's really focused on like, okay, like make sure like A and B are okay, and like, but not really focusing so much on like, how's C doing? Like, how are they feeling about these things? And I think that I'm glad now that I think there's more of a focus on like making sure that everybody's agency is intact is really important, and consent, and like, yeah, because those are some good things. But so yeah, at that point I was reading those things, and I was like, okay, like, yeah, I understand that everyone should have in the relationship should ideally have their own agency. And like, I know that Sam and Jamie having sex and dating like doesn't actually affect me, but it still felt kind of hard at that point. And they actually didn't really end up doing all that much. I think they hooked up like once, and then Jamie started dating another guy that she worked with. And that was kind of hard for Sam. And that was also an interesting learning experience for me, because I'd known Jamie for a couple of years at that point, and she's my close friend and still one of my closest friends. But from her past relationships, I kind of knew that she wasn't like the best at communication or prioritizing other people's feelings. And so I kind of told Sam like, hey, like, you can do this, but like, and like, this isn't me trying to meddle, but I'm just going to warn you that like, Jamie isn't always the most like she means well, but she doesn't always have like the best like outcomes, I guess, for people. And so she did end up ghosting him after they hooked up, and I think that was really hard for him. But it was also good exercise in, me not saying like I told you so, but just and this is also one of the things, I can't remember which book talked about this, but like letting your partners like make their own mistakes at times, and letting them like take responsibility for their own feelings and not trying to make people feel secure, because you can't make other people like feel anything. And trying to make people feel secure can actually like backfire at times. So just practicing, letting things be as they may be.
Mm-hmm.
Which is super hard, especially when like you saw, like, you knew Sam well and you knew Jamie well,
right?
And you saw the writing on the wall, but you also have to like let it play out.
Yeah, take a step back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think one thing I wasn't as prepared for is that I was really I think a lot of people who are just starting polyamory, like I think a common advice is like, make sure your relationship's stable ahead of time. Like if you're romantic, and this is implying romantic relationship, like if you're having relationship problems, like adding more people dynamic is not going to like fix anything, which I do agree with. And I think one thing I wasn't ready for is that I felt really jealous, not of Jamie because she was getting attention from Sam, but I actually felt pretty jealous of Sam because he was getting more attention from Jamie than I felt I was getting as a friend at the time. And I think that I was really insecure in my friendship with her and didn't really realize that. So I was also working on those feelings of like and it was something I hadn't expected because, I was more like, ready for the typical things of like, it's common to feel jealousy when your partner goes on a first date. And this is something you'll get more used to over time, and which I do think is true. But I think it was kind of hard incorporating or seeing my partner do stuff with my friends that I wasn't really getting from my friends. And that jealousy was kind of a surprise to me, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's a different way to look at jealousy too, that it's not over your partner, it's over a friendship. But how did you, or how have you navigated through that?
Yeah. So I think in that in that instance, I think it just kind of faded away because he and Jamie kind of stopped seeing each other because Jamie was like kind of not being great about things. And so things just kind of went back to like the status quo, I guess. Or I no longer had like an active comparison, I guess, if that makes sense. I was like, things were
if that had fizzled out, it kind of ended. So you didn't have those.
But that, that I guess kind of like friend jealousy did kind of continue to haunt me though, because my next foray into relationships was one of my good friends, Cam, who I had met working at my university's LGBT center, who I'd know, they were 1 year below me. And so at the time, I was a junior and they were a sophomore, but I'd known them since I was a sophomore and they were a first year. And we'd become like pretty good friends through work, but hadn't really hung out like much outside of work. Aside from like sending each other like occasional memes and stuff. But I did consider them a good friend. And I think we were pretty bonded over having similar experiences of, growing up in places where we were kind of like the only openly queer people. And we both grew up like experiencing pretty bad mental illnesses at a young age that we'd both definitely gotten like under much better control by the time we got to college. But, like depression like never like goes away, which is pretty unfortunate. So we had bonded a lot over those things. And I kind of mentioned them like, hey, like, Sam and I are like non-monogamous now. And we were kind of like flirting back and forth with each other for a while. And at one point I was like, I can't, like, I'm not the best at reading social signals sometimes. So I was like, are you flirting with me? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, that's cool. I'm flirting with you too. So that was kind of a fun like thing. And so Cam and I were like, not like dating, but we were starting to like hang out more, I guess, in that context. And I guess you would call it dating, but more in like the high school sense of dating, I guess, where there's not really like particular expectations, but we were watching movies at each other's place and like making out and all that stuff. And then one weekend, Sam came to visit and the three of us were hanging out and we kind of like not we kind of like impromptu, and like they had met a couple times before but hadn't really like hung out or like at least not in this context, and so we kind of ended up having a couple like impromptu threesomes which was fun. And like we definitely like made sure that everyone was good with everything, and we like went slower at the start. And so then we were kind of found ourselves in like I guess you would call it like a triad configuration. And I think it was unexpected, and it was pretty cool at first. And I think like the NRE was definitely like super strong. And I was like, this is so cool. Like I have my partner and this cool new person, and we're like all like doing stuff together. And I think that in hindsight, I really wish I'd gotten to know, or I really wish I'd worked more on my relationship with Cam individually before we started doing things all three together. Because I think then the next progression from there, right, because of the dynamics. So the dynamic was at times. So Cam and I went to school together, and then Sam would come and visit like on weekends. And so Cam and I had a couple of classes together, and so we would see each other during that. We might see each other during work, but then like weekend time, they and Sam wanted to hang out, which is like totally valid. I think that even within triads, it's important for everyone to be able to navigate, negotiate individual time with different partners. And like that's a value I hold today, and that was a value I still had back then, but it was more like an on paper value, I guess, because that's what I wanted to do, and I wanted them to have that. But also like my internal feelings was like, man, like I want to hang out like with the three of us. Like we have such limited, or I wanted to hang out with Sam because we really only I was used to having 2 days a week from him, so to get that to cut down to like 1 day a week felt like a big loss, I guess. And I did find some comfort in the books and other podcasts I was listening to about the point where it's like, your partner's time is their time, and when you're monogamous, they probably chose to spend a lot of it with you, but like you're not necessarily like entitled to those things. And I think there's also like there's a sliding scale where it's like, yeah, like yes, your partner should spend some time with you. Like if for most relationships, like it's not saying that like you shouldn't expect time from your partner, but the fact that like when you open up, you're probably going to get less time with them because they're seeing other people, which like is just a fact. So I think they wanted to spend more individual time together, and that was really hard for me, I think, because I was seeing Cam wanting to spend like individual date time with Sam, and I totally didn't intend for their names to rhyme, by the way, but it's just it's what we're going with at this point.
It's all good.
Yeah, and I perceived that Cam didn't want to spend like as much time with me, and so I was feeling kind of like that rejection, I guess. And so, or I at least perceived it as rejection. I don't think it was ever intended to be that way, because like, yeah, Cam and I, like, we saw each other in class, we saw each other in school. Sam was only here once or twice a week. It would make sense that they would want to get to know Sam better individually. But at the time, for me, it felt like, oh, you guys just like want to hang out together, or like you don't want me to be there. And so that was really hard for me for a while. And I think I was also I also didn't have the best communication. I think a lot of the books talk about like here's how to do nonviolent communication, here's how to communicate your needs and wants. But I think I at the time hadn't learned just like knowing what I wanted, I guess. So that's like the first half of communication, I guess, is just like figuring out like what are my needs and wants. So I wasn't great at figuring those out, and I also wasn't great at communicating to Cam what those actually were. And I think because I knew about our kind of shared history of like not always having like the best mental health, I felt like I couldn't really tell them about certain things that I thought might upset them, which like looking back in hindsight, like that wasn't healthy for anybody. Like that was a really bad move on my part, because I was trying to do things that I thought they would like. And I think after we talked about it kind of after things ended, which I'll get into in a minute, like they were also kind of trying to do things that they thought I wanted to hear. And so we were both kind of, and just like not really being true to ourselves in the situation and trying to be a people pleaser, but ended up just making things worse for everybody. So yeah.
Yeah, that's tough when you're both trying to, I don't know, appease maybe the other person, or you're trying to do what's best, and it ends up hurting them in the long run. And that's really hard. And,
it is.
And frustrating.
Yeah. It's extremely difficult. And like, how do you, it's a learning experience, I guess. Like it's hard. I don't know. You want to do different. You're like, can I just go back and try that again?
Yeah. So we did things together for probably like a month or so. And then I kind of sat down with both of them. I was like, hey, y'all, like, I love both of you in different ways. And I still love Cam to this day, where we have done a lot of, repair, and we're good friends again now, but like, I don't love them in like a romantic way, but I just, things weren't really working. And I was like, I'm just going to like take a step back. I'm going to continue being with Sam, obviously. So I took a step back from that, and then they continued seeing each other for a while. And that was also a little bit hard, I guess, because I was like, damn, like I couldn't make things work, but like Sam could. But again, like just making like not super healthy comparisons, which I have done a lot of work on, and I think I've come a long way on that. But yeah, I guess it's also that sense of, I think in polyamory, sometimes there can be kind of the jealousy of like, oh, like my partner has a date tonight and I don't, like, even if that's like not really like what you want at the time. It's just that sometimes you get that feeling of like, like I could be having these things too, but like, it's fine to have different things going on. And then so that was about like February 2020. And then we all know what happened in March 2020.
Yes.
So at that point, I moved in with Sam, and it was at that point, like I didn't know, because all my classes were moved to Zoom, and I had an off-campus apartment with my roommates at that point, but I didn't want to be on college, because I just knew, like, just seeing people like partying and being like terrible, like I just couldn't handle that. And at first, actually, so I moved in with Sam in March, and originally it was supposed to just be like a spring break thing. Like, they said that we're going to be gone for an extra week after. We really don't know how long this is going to last. So I kind of just, I took Pebble, and I took like a suitcase of spring break's worth of clothes and stuff. And then, so we moved in with him, and I'd stay with him during breaks and stuff before. So I'd lived, and I'd spent like a lot of nights with him. So it wasn't really like a new experience living together, I guess, at that point. But this was the first time we had lived together for more than a couple weeks. And I was doing all my classes online, and he actually was still working, because he works for a pretty prominent university. He works in their tech services department, like their IT office. And so when Roy Cooper said, like, only essential workers have to work, everyone else stay home, he was like, cool, I guess I'm staying home. And his office was like, actually, all the other IT people are going to be working remotely, but your team of 6 people is still going to need to come in person and work in the hospitals every day, because there's actually a separate hospital, because there's a hospital that's associated with the university, and they have a separate hospital IT team, but for some reason his team works on all the phones in the hospital. So he was told that he'd have to still come in for this, and so I was like, oh my god, like, so my partner's like having to work in this potentially dangerous environment, and I'm living with him. Like, that's kind of a lot of stress. Like, because I didn't think, like, neither of us have the health conditions that put us at super high risk for COVID, at least from what we knew at the time. Because, like, at the time in March, the message was like, if you're young, you're probably going to be fine, unless you're like diabetic or obese, or like immunocompromised. And we were like, cool, we're like neither of those things. But then, as we know now, it can really, maybe not, it can kill people our age. And even if it doesn't kill them, it can still leave them with a lot of like really terrible side effects. Like, I know some people who've got it and like haven't got their taste of smell back in like 8 months. And like, they don't know if that's ever coming back. I'm like, I would prefer not to get this disease. So after living with him for a month or two, and also, so that plus the combination of living together in an 800 square foot apartment that had like 2 windows in it, that was pretty stressful. So I decided to move back in with my parents, because they have a very large house and more access to like outdoor walking paths and stuff, versus like at his apartment place, I could walk around like the parking lot, and that was pretty much it. So I decided to move back in with my parents, and I actually was able to successfully like, self-quarantine for 2 weeks, because they're lucky enough where they actually have like a separate floor that I could stay on, and like a separate kitchen that I could use. So I did the traditional, like, stay away from people for like 2 weeks, which was also really hard.
Yeah, it's really hard.
Especially when you go from like, living with a partner every day to just being like completely by yourself for 2 weeks. It's like, man, this sucks. So that was in about May. And at the time, I intended to stay there until after July because I was also doing my research project, or my college had a program that was like a summer research intensive. And in the past, like pre-COVID, it was a thing where, you're on campus for a few months and you're like working with your advisor and you're like doing the science every day. Mine was like a qualitative experiment or a research thing, whereas actually I was doing research on the experience of previously incarcerated transmasculine people, because my first year of college, I did a pretty big project about the experience of trans women in prison, which is they're generally treated really terrible. They're generally put into men's prisons and sexually assaulted and have really terrible outcomes. And I really couldn't find that many stories about transmasculine people. And I was like, well, I can't imagine them putting like men with beards into like a women's prison. But I also imagine if you're like a man who has a vagina in a men's prison, you're probably very likely to get sexually assaulted. So I ended up doing some qualitative studies, and I got 6 people to talk to me. And so I'm still working on that paper now. But so that was what my research was basically about, what happens to trans men when they go to prison. So yeah, hopefully I'll have a paper published sometime this summer. That's my goal for this summer. It was my goal for last summer too, but we're still kind of in this thing. So now it's my goal for this summer. And so I was originally, my plans were to, kind of be at my college, like for most of the summer doing that. So I was like, I'll just stay at my parents' house and do that. And I'll move back in with Sam after August, or hopefully this thing will end before then. And so actually at the time, and at that point, I was still in contact with Cam, like as a friend at that point, because we kind of decided like, hey, like this like romance and sex thing isn't working, but we did still care deeply about each other. It's like we had like kind of like a breakup, but it was never like a whole messy thing. Like it was a very amicable, like, hey, like let's like just, go back to being friends and try to work on our communication in general and stuff. And so at that point I knew they were living with their parents who were like pretty transphobic and like moderately homophobic and who just like were really like not great for them in general. So I suggested that they move in with, or I asked Sam if he had considered like inviting Cam to come live with him, because I knew they were in like a really like not great housing situation. He was like, I hadn't really thought about that. But he invited Cam to come stay with him. And so they ended up living together at his apartment for like a couple months. Yeah, so they did that. And that was like fine because I wasn't there anyways. And I was like, just glad that Cam could be in a better living situation. And like, they were more okay with like the potential risks of living with Sam at that time. And I knew like, I knew Sam, like I trusted him and I knew he was wearing his mask inside all the time, but it's just hard to know, working in a hospital is like one of the more high risk environments you can be in during this thing. And I knew at one point he did have to like, actually he didn't, which I was really mad about this at the time, because he didn't have to go into a COVID patient's room, but they sent him into one anyways, because they were like, oh, this like phone needs fixing, but the phone was like actually like outside of the room. So yeah, but he was fine. But yeah, so they were living together for a couple months, and this was definitely one of my probably like biggest polyamory regret / slip-ups. I think it was in probably like June at this time, where I expressed to Sam like, hey, I know I originally said I was going to stay here till August, but like I really miss you, and at this point I feel, we know a little bit more about how the virus works, and I feel that since you're wearing a mask and since you like, I knew he worked with coworkers, but like it was a pretty small team and they work in like a pretty large warehouse, and he'd actually had a coworker who came into contact with somebody who was COVID positive at some point. And then he and I ended up getting tested. This was back when the test was like the big, like the really invasive nasal thing, and that sucked. But we were both negative from that. And his coworker, who had like a lot more contact with the positive person, also ended up testing negative. So at that point, I was like, okay, like I think, there's still some risk, but it's a lot lower of a risk than I was initially like worried about, to the point where, like life's all about like balanced risk. And I knew that by living with him, I was assuming more risk than I was with living with my parents, but that was kind of less than like the other mental health effects of being separated for a long time. So I expressed to Sam like, hey, I'm considering possibly moving back in with you sooner than I had thought. Like, just want to put that on the back burner, like just want to put that out there. And then I think like I probably should have told him like, but like, don't kick Cam out over this. Like, I want to talk to them too, and just like see how they're doing, if they're, thinking about maybe like how long they want to live there and stuff like that. But then but I did not do that. And he ended up telling Cam like, hey, if Jacob wants to come back, I'm going to ask you to leave. And that, it just, at the time I was like in that. So as you can probably imagine, Cam didn't appreciate hearing that, as most people wouldn't. And they were upset, and I was upset about that because like that wasn't my intention. Like I super was not asking Sam like to, kick Cam out. Like I didn't want Cam to feel kicked out. I would have stayed at my parents through August if they were like, yeah, I'm going to stay here through July. Like we're doing really well. But that's what happened. And so Cam moved out, and we kind of had like a little rift between us for a bit. And it just felt bad because like I think it was a combination of miscommunication, but also like Sam probably shouldn't have said that. Like
just to be clear, I'm gonna ask. So thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah.
So while this was all happening, were Cam and Sam, when they were living together, were they still in a relationship with each other?
I think so. They were never in like a romantic relationship, or they never like defined it as like a romantic relationship. I think they were much more like, we'll play Mario Kart together and like make dinner and stuff and like occasionally have sex. But like, yeah, like they were in like more than just like a strictly like platonic relationship at that point, I guess, which like I was fine with and I knew about and stuff.
So yeah, okay. It was their definition of whatever that was. But I can see how like that had previously been triggering for you, and then like moving through this and then have this happen. And then, a lot of guilt there. 'Cause you're like, that wasn't my intention. But so I guess moving forward, I guess, where did things go?
Yeah. So from there, I think I did end up talking more with Cam about it. And I was like, hey, like, I'm just like super sorry about that. Like I legitimately would have stayed there through August if you were having a good time. Like that super wasn't my intention, and I'm really sorry that like that was construed in that way. And I think it was like, but there's only really so much repair you can do for that, because like even though I think they were less upset after we talked about it, because they now knew that I was never trying to say like, hey, like, hey Sam, like kick came out so I can do this, but they still had the knowledge now that Sam would pick me over them, I guess, or that, Sam would say like, hey, like I might need you to move out if Jacob wants to come back and live with me. So it's kind of like, that's like a bag you can't, or like it's a box you can't like shut again, I guess.
Yeah, it's already out there.
Yeah, so they took a little bit of a break, and I think they saw each other a couple more times, and we did hang out like once or twice after, and this was, Cam actually went to the point of like, self-quarantining for 2 weeks after seeing other people, because, in order to hang out with us, because that was kind of like my boundary at that time, was like, hey, like because I really didn't, after I moved out with my parents, like I don't think I didn't get within 6 feet of them again until like after we were vaccinated in like April. So like I took that boundary pretty seriously, and I didn't want to, I guess it ended up being more of like a rule, I guess, than it would have been in pre-COVID times, because like the implication there was also that like, Cam and Sam couldn't really hang out without Cam self-quarantining either, because like my boundary was that like I would have to move out if Sam wanted to see them, and like Sam didn't want me to move out, so like it was more of a thing than because like if COVID wasn't a thing, like they definitely could have negotiated like their own like levels of comfort, but because of it's like a transmissible disease, like Sam and I had to find the common ground of what are we comfortable with while living together. So Cam was also kind of subject to that, I guess. But yeah, we ended up hanging out a little bit over the summer, but yeah, I really didn't see that many people while all this was going on. So yeah, and so and then I think it was maybe like July 2020 or something, Cam ended up starting to date Ryan, and so they wanted to be monogamous with them. So Cam and Sam stopped, they're still like, they just kind of like went back to being friends, and like we still have like a group chat where we're all sending each other memes, and we did hang out as a group recently, and that was fun and stuff, but they kind of ended their like sexual relationship, and we were basically just kind of thrust back into monogamy for a while, and it was kind of nice, I think, because it really gave me some time to like reflect on like my values and what I wanted, I think, and also like it gave me plenty of time to think about a lot of things, but to also think about, how things didn't work out with me and Cam, and, thinking more about my, kind of like friend jealousy I had both experienced with that, and also like friend jealousy I experienced more when Sam and Jamie were doing things. And I think that, and knowing what I know now, I think I would have acted differently in both those circumstances. But I think that I also like had to have those experiences in order to learn those things. So like, I think if you like, rewound the tape and like put me back there without much different knowledge, like, I don't think I would have really done that. I don't think I would have acted that differently. So I'm glad that I had those experiences. And then, yeah. So then I think at different points, I, got back on Tinder, and like Sam totally knew about this and was cool as it. And I was talking to like a couple people, but it was really hard during like, the quarantine months, because there are people you would talk to, but then be like, well, we can't really meet up or like do much. So like we can talk, but that's about it. So those kind of all just like fizzled out. Cause I think, everybody had a lot of time, but I think we underestimated like how emotionally draining it was to just, kind of worry about potentially dying like all the time. And
right?
Just like going to the grocery store was like really stressful. And seeing friends, even from a distance, was like pretty stressful. And so I was still doing online college, and Zoom college was not the most fun. I was doing 2 classes during the fall, and even 2 classes just felt like a lot. And then this most recent spring semester, I ended up doing my internship for my major. And I originally, pre-COVID, I was planning on, because it's called block semester, when you do like your internship and then take 3 classes that are related to your internship. And that's like one of like, the core things of my major. And so pre-COVID, I was planning on doing that fall 2020 and then graduating early in December, because I had a lot of credits coming from high school. But then during COVID, I was like, or I had to make the decision in August, or it might have been in like May 2020, actually, like of what classes to register for in the fall. And so based on the information I had in May 2020, I was like, well, I'm sure things will be fine by the spring. So I'll do my internship then, so I can do it in person, and have things be more normal. And so I'll do like a couple filler classes in the fall. And so that's what I did. And then, things were not normal by the spring, but I did a virtual internship, which was not as exciting, but like I got my credits and got my degree. So that's,
and we're able to graduate, right?
Yeah.
So now,
mm-hmm.
You said, you've been on Tinder a little bit over, the last many months, but like, where are you and Sam in exploring non-monogamy at the moment?
Yeah. So, actually, so in January of 2021, I had been living with Sam for like almost a whole year now, and we were still in his small apartment. And I was like, I need to get out of here. Like, his lease ended in like March 2021, but I was like, I can't stay here like any longer. So we actually got to looking for places together, and we found this really awesome like 2,000 square foot townhouse that was like 5 minutes from where we currently lived. So we ended up getting this place, and it's really awesome. That's where I am now, and you can see I have natural light coming in, and it's so much better. So moving in together, or like for real, like having a place that was like both equally ours, because like, I had all my stuff at Sam's apartment, but it was really like, his apartment. I was kind of just like, I felt more like a guest there, but now this is like our place, so that was really nice to have a place that was like, we can, this is like our place, and we can decorate it together and all that fun stuff. Mm-hmm. So I think probably in like February or so, I was like, things are, getting better. The vaccines have been coming out for a while. I still wasn't on the list for quite a while, but Sam had actually gotten his like first shot by then, because he worked in like that healthcare setting, and he really should have got vaccinated even earlier than he did. But after emailing a couple of higher ups, they were like, yeah, we should vaccinate these like 6 people who've been working in the hospital every day since this thing started. So he was getting vaccinated, and I was feeling more optimistic about like, I probably can't meet people for a while, but it'll be like, a month or two versus like who knows how long this is going to go on for. So I got back on Tinder and talked with a law student for a while called Lena, and we talked for a while, and she also was polyamorous, and she had like a boyfriend who she had, was recently proposing to and stuff. But then her grandfather got really sick, and that was really hard for her, and so she kind of like, not like fully ghosted, but like we had plans to meet up and stuff, and we're getting along well. But then I think she was just like not really in the place to have a relationship, which was understandable. So I was like, whatever. And then I tried again in late March, because at that point, I actually was able to get my vaccine earlier than I was expecting, because I was called in to help guest teach youth martial arts, was something I did in high school and hadn't done in a while. But one of my family friends who owns a school nearby was like, hey, I'm going to need somebody to cover for me for 2 weeks. This is like, essential childcare. Like, wasn't exactly like wink, wink, nudge, nudge, but it was like, hey, like I need somebody to run my business for 2 days. And also like, you can like get vaccinated a little bit earlier. So I was like, sure. So after I got my second shot, I was like, this, like, yeah, the things are looking, pretty reasonable now. I'll get back out there. So I got back on Tinder and was trying more actively, I guess, to meet people versus last time when I was just like, I'll swipe around, like, to see like who's out there. But this time I was looking more, and I ended up matching with Ray, who is now my boyfriend, that's going really well. But yeah, so we matched on Tinder and we were talking for a while. So we had our first date. We like got boba and like sat outside like on the lawn. And that went well. And then within a couple weeks, he had been fully vaccinated. So then we were able to actually like hang out for real. And that was really nice after a year of just like seeing so few people. It was just really nice to be able to just like hang out with somebody inside and be like, hey, I'm not going to kill you or myself. So like, that's neat.
Right. It's the little things.
Yeah. So it was interesting though, because like at that point, like, in theory, like Sam and I had been non-monogamous for like over a year at that point, which means like we weren't newbies to like the concepts or like the questions you ask about your relationship or your partner when like you first express those things. But it had been a while. Like we were basically like functionally monogamous for a year because of the pandemic, so there's a little bit of getting back to like and we'd also grown as people. So, and I think living together every day versus spending like weekends together was also like, since the last time we had tried non-monogamy, that was a big shift. And I think that like now spending 1 or 2 weekend days with somebody else is just like, yeah, it's whatever, versus like, hey, that's like all our time together for 2 weeks. Yeah, so I started dating Ray, and it was his first experience with polyamory. And like like I was saying earlier, that I see about Tinder is you can put things about in your profile that like might be deal breakers for some people, and it's like no hard feelings, but like just putting it out there. And I think in my profile I wrote like polyamorous and comma not looking for a third, because unicorn hunting is like a really big problem on Tinder. Ask any questions if you want to or whatever. Yeah, so Ray and I started seeing each other, and I was kind of like, do you have any questions about anything? He's like, I don't know, like I'm really enjoying spending time with you. And I think after a few dates, he came over to our place and he met Sam, because, Sam lives here. And I think we got like brunch or something. And it was, very like amicable, like, kind of like traditional, like kitchen table polyamory, I guess. But it was, when we hang out, we tend to hang out here because, I have like a really nice townhouse, and Ray has like grad student housing with like 4 other roommates. So we've been trying to, find out the balance of making sure that like Ray and I get enough time, but also that like, Sam doesn't feel like kicked out of his own space, because I don't want to be like, you can't be in the living room when we're watching TV, but he's happy to give us space. And I think it's helpful because we have like, upstairs and a downstairs. And right now I'm upstairs, and like our computer stuff is up here. So we can kind of like take turns like giving each other space and stuff. And as you can see, we actually recently added a bed up here. But so it's nice to have an extra bed up here, because now we were like, talking about potential sleepover stuff that, nobody has to be like on the couch or anything like that. And I think we've talked about potentially like switching between having either me or Sam like downstairs in our bedroom, or having the like person who's sleeping by themselves be up here and the people who are like sleeping together be downstairs, like the big king bed, which is kind of nice. So for now, and so Ray and I have been together for a couple months now, and he's come over for a couple sleepovers here. So Ray and I slept like in the king bed, and Sam has slept up here. And I've kind of been like, like, are you sure you're okay with this? But he's like, yeah, I'm fine. And one thing I've also been working on in my communication is that, trusting what other people say, trusting they're being truthful in their responses to me. Because I think that's like more of an anxiety thing and like kind of a people pleaser thing. Is like are you just saying that you're okay with this because you want me to be happy? Because that's something I might potentially do or have done in the past.
Right.
So, but now I'm like, okay, if you had a problem with it, I trust that you would tell me and we would like, renegotiate things. And so things have been going pretty well. And yeah.
Wow.
I think we got the whole story.
No, thank you for walking us through all of that.
Yeah.
And now, just out of curiosity, like, is Sam dating too?
Yeah. So he's he decided to get on Tinder after Ray and I have been seeing each other for a couple weeks. And it was kind of fun to like, get back on, because he hadn't used Tinder since like we met and stuff. So I was kind of like explaining like how the app works now. It's not that different, but there's like a couple different features or whatever. And just like, it was kind of fun, like, scrolling through people and just being like, oh, that bio is so cringe. Or like, like we weren't like looking for like people together, but it was just kind of fun to just recreationally tind, like with your friends or whatever. I said tind is a verb. That was a joke. Nobody says that. But he's not really like actively like, going out on like lots of dates or whatever. So he hasn't had a date with anybody in a pretty long time. But I mean, if he wanted to, he could. But I think I don't want to say like picky, but I think that I think him and I fall in the category of like, we're not going to go on a date with somebody unless we're like actually like pretty interested in them. And like some people I think, go on dates more as like a fun thing, which is, that's fine. Like, I totally support people doing that. But for him and for me, it's just like, do I want to spend like time and money talking with this person who I don't think I actually had that much in common with, just like on the, the off chance we'll actually get along well. So yeah, so he's theoretically dating again, but like, not really, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. I think that, thank you for sharing all of that. Normally, we ask a lot of follow-up questions, but I feel like you wove so many of our questions into your story.
I'm definitely my ADD comes out when I talk on stuff because it just kind of all.
It's perfect.
Have fun in editing later.
No, it was perfect. And I think, to Emma's point, like, we've gotten a lot out of the story, and you've like woven in little lessons and things that you've picked up along the way. And I think that's super helpful and fantastic. So thank you for doing that. It made our job easier.
I know, exactly.
And I did, actually one thing I know we're like a little bit over an hour now.
No, you're
okay.
I know one of the things I mentioned in my like submission form is I wanted to talk a little bit about my experience as like, a younger person being like, openly polyamorous on dating apps and like with my friends and stuff and how that's gone. Cause this podcast is about normalizing non-monogamy. And I feel like it's gotten more normalized, which I think is really cool. I think that, having trans and polyamorous in my bio, I was kind of expecting to get like a lot like fewer likes than I did. So I thought that was pretty cool. There were a lot of people in my age bracket. I think my age setting was like 20 to 24. Or something like that. Because even though I'm almost 22, just like dating people under 20 feels weird, and dating people above like 25 feels like kind of weird. Also, just for me personally, if you're in an age gap relationship and it works for you, like great, more power to you. But yeah, so I was pleasantly surprised that a lot of people were, at least it at least like wasn't a turnoff for them. And to also match, I was surprised that there's other people in my age range who also had it in their bio. So like there are other people out there who are actively practicing, I guess. And I haven't been able to find that much like community, I guess, around here. I know there's like the Triangle Polyamory group, and they had more like IRL meetups and stuff. And I noticed that people who were there tended to be like a little bit older, which is understandable because I think a lot of people who come to polyamory tend to come from like, very established relationships from like a long time. And like, I'm sure that, for me and Sam, like 2 years seems like not a long time, but when you're like between 18 and 20, like those 2 years do seem like a long time, proportionally of your life. And so I was not really going to a lot of those meetups because people tend to be older, and we turned 21 during 2020, so like bars were just like out of the question, like totally not. I mean, they were open, unfortunately, but like we were just super not going to that. So, and we still haven't really felt comfortable doing that, even though we've both been fully vaccinated since like April, but still just like that definitely feels like a higher risk setting. Indoors, people not socially distancing because they're drunk. So it's prior to that. I feel like a lot of the polyamory things, I think there was probably more potentially because there was more overlap with kink communities, which is also fine. I feel like a lot of events tended to be 21 and up, which is like very understandable. So before we were 21, those events weren't really that accessible to us, and now it hasn't really mattered because we're not really going to events again yet anyways. But pretty much all of my friends who I've told have been like pretty on board with it. And some of them have been a little, I wouldn't say like confused, but like they don't really like get it, but they're like, hey, what makes you happy? I have had a few people be like, oh, like, are you and Sam doing okay? Like, did something happen? Like, or I think and I did tell my parents actually, back in 2019 when like Cam and Sam and I had been together for a little bit, just because not because like I had to, but I have a really close relationship with my parents, and like I said earlier, they were super on board with me being queer and coming out as trans and stuff, and so I was like, I just want to bring this up with you guys, and I think they were in the same boat of like, well, we don't really get it, and like maybe you'll get hurt, but like we want you to be happy, and so like if this makes you happy. And I think my mom, I think she thought it was like a phase, or like we're gonna grow out of it or whatever, and I was okay with that reaction because it was I'd call it like a mostly positive reaction, I guess, because they were still being supportive of us, and I'm like that's like definitely like a privilege a lot of people don't have. So with that, I was like, that's fine. And I think that it was probably also on me that for a while that my mom thought that, Sam and I were like potentially going to break up, or that this was going to like, because that was a little bit of a frustrating assumption, because she was like, oh, I had friends who did polyamory and that like caused their divorce. And I'm like, well, I don't know your friend's relationship personally, but I'm going to guess that was not like the cause and effect. Like there might have been other factors involved, but like I don't think that many relationships that I think if they had tried to stay monogamous, they probably also would have gotten divorced anyways.
Right. Right.
So, and like I knew myself, and I knew Sam, and I knew our relationship, and I was very confident in our ability to, navigate challenges together. But I knew that like we were not opening up out of like a, we have to still stay together, but we're not attracted to each other anymore. Like that was definitely like not our experience. And so I was like, okay, Mom, like, okay, whatever you say. But I was just kind of like, I kind of knew that we would prove her wrong, I guess. And then we didn't end up talking about it too much more with my parents because like, like I said, COVID, and we weren't really doing anything with other people anyways. And I recently brought it up with them again because I wanted to tell them that Ray and I were dating, because even though, we've been together for like 3 months now and it's like not super serious or anything like that, but I feel like, if I wasn't, already with Sam and like we were dating and Ray and I were like monogamous, I feel like it'd be pretty normal to, just like, tell your parents what's going on in your life and who you're dating and stuff like that. So, and they were kind of surprised because I was like, hey, like I have some good news for you guys, so I'll come by and share in person. And they were kind of like, they kind of had no idea what I was going to tell them about. But I was like, yeah, I know I've mentioned this to y'all. I know I told y'all like a year and a half ago that Sam and I are non-monogamous. I want to let you know that I've been dating a new guy named Ray, and it's been going really well. I hear a couple things about him. And they were kind of surprised, I think. But they were, again, like, okay, if it makes you happy, like, if you're sure. And I think they were pretty unsure. But, yeah. Like, that's okay. I think that they were like, we don't understand polyamory, but we support you. And, like, we'll be here if things fall apart. I'm like, great to know you think that's my relationships are destined to fail, but I know they're like not, so that's okay. I'm glad you support me. So they're trying, I think. And I think they are they'll probably be more open to learning more about it. I think they just don't know a lot, which is a lot of people don't, so that's fine.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sounds like they've been really, really supportive. I mean, like you said, like they said they'd be there for you no matter what happens, and I think like there's not much more you can ask for at that point.
Yeah, for sure.
And it might take a little bit of time for them to like continue wrapping their mind around it all too. But yeah.
Well, I mean, thank you for sharing everything you've shared with us. It's been amazing hearing your story and hearing how like the non-monogamy dating scene is. It sounds like it's opening up for the younger generation and like, you know, coming out of high school. And I feel not like we're that much older, but like, you know, 10 years. And when we were coming out of high school and college, like it wasn't that prominent.
No.
So, and then like you said, you layer on top of it being trans and everything else, like trans and polyamorous and everything. And so it's like, you have found success, and I think that's really fantastic to hear, and we're happy.
Yes, and I'm so glad you brought up that point about like the age too, because and the societal, I guess, acceptance. I think it's really important to get out there, and because that's what we're all trying to do, normalize this. So thank you for speaking of that.
Yeah, I haven't had anybody who I've said, like, you know, all my friends I've told, like, they've all known what polyamorous meant, you know, which I think is definitely an improvement from the last 10 years. And, like, I live in, like, a pretty, like, urban area, but, like, definitely not, like, a big city by any means. Like, it's not like, you know, I'm out in, like, LA or New York or anything like that. So, and, like, I know we call our pocket North Carolina, like it's like the South, but like it's not like really the South, but like, or at least where I live, it's not really. But I'm definitely have continued to be pleasantly surprised by how well I've been received here in all my various identities. So yeah.
Love it.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I think that is a great place to end. And thank you so much for your time and your story and everything today. It was wonderful to talk to you, and we wish you the best, and hopefully, you know, we'd love to hear an update soon too.
Yeah.
So have a wonderful rest of your day. Unless I feel like I'm interrupting you. No. Okay. Well, have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you so much for everything.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And we're back. You know, you don't do that with me anymore.
What?
And we're back.
Well, all right, let's do it.
And we're back. Nailed it.
Crushed it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jacob, for reaching out to us and coming on the show, sharing your story. We highly value everyone who reaches out to us and shares their story. So thank you again.
Yeah, this show does not exist without people like Jacob and all of the other 190-ish guests that we've had on the show.
We're getting close to 200.
Woo! Wow.
Very close.
Got excited there.
So thank you, Jacob.
And thank you, listener, who is about to email us and want to come on the show.
Yes.
We are so touched that you're about to do that. Thank you. Please pull over before you do that.
Yeah, pull the car over. Go and email us. Say you want to come on the show. That would be awesome. Again, just go to our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com. There's links in your podcast player.
And while you're there, you can also sign up for the amazing Patreon community. You can get tested for STIs. And you can do any other thing. You can get ice cream. It's a pretty versatile...
Through our website, we're now selling ice cream?
It's a pretty versatile website.
Okay, well, this is a new feature that I was not aware of.
And let's see. Next week, we have a super awesome interview with Sonia and Gabriel. He is producing and directing a new animated educational series on kink that is about to start crowdfunding, and we have seen the trailer. The trailer comes out next week as part of the crowdfunding campaign. It is kick-ass.
Yes.
The interview with Sonia and Gabriel is kick-ass. We are so excited, and we will see everybody in a week.
Yes, come back, listen in 1 week, and we will see you then. Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.